Hi, I'm Jacob Allen. This is Mod 9 Case Study. So Section 1, just an overview of what happened. Richard Inman is the principal at Rocket Junior High. He has a good rapport with troubled student 15-year-old James. A teacher reported James handed David, a scholar student, something in the hall, and they suspected it was drugs. David reported James ordered him to hold the brass knuckles, and then the officer went on to arrest David. James owned up to it, hoping it would get David out of trouble, but both students got arrested. Then James was placed into an alternative school, and David was supposed to be as well. But against the school policy, David was not put into the alternative setting. And then, since the principal, Richard, went against what was supposed to be policy, Richard's boss said he will be given a reprimand, or he will be reprimanded and be written up. First off, the legal issues. David was in possession of an illegal weapon on school grounds, whether it was his or not. James says it was his. Both students are in custody, so we are dealing with actual crime taking place. And then both students are going to have their placement changed, which is an educational legal issue, because that may lead to different things depending on what kind of plans these students have. If either of the students has an IEP, there's even more legal things that will have to happen. This page is where the ethical and legal decision-making standard I felt like came in, because that's what we're talking about here. As far as ethical issues, if Richard stands up for his student, his job could be on the line, but also it's the right thing to do. Next up, the other big ethical issue is, how is James supposed to take the messaging from the school if he does have to go to alternative? Are you supposed to just you're supposed to let bullies happen, or you're supposed to stand up to a bully? What happens if that student ends up fighting him and then he fights back? What message are you sending James? So this is where I felt like, based on the decision you make, you can cultivate the ethical behavior in others by showing students, there is tough decisions to make, ethical tough decisions to make. A one-sentence summary of this whole situation: a troubled student pressured an honored student into holding brass knuckles, which led both students being sent to an alternative school. So the facts of the situation, the people. Richard, the principal, went to the school here. He has good relationships with the students. James is a tattooed, troubled 15-year-old. He has tardies from what the story was saying. David Ramos is an honor student who plays in the band. Richard does not have a strong relationship with David. And then there's also the police officer here, and he was in the room when all the said things happened, when David was arrested, obviously, and when James confessed. This school is a school of 900 people. Southside, I didn't see an actual city, but Southside, we're assuming probably an inner city school, but can't fully assume. And then a school with students that fall victim to the system is something else that was mentioned. And then as far as programming goes, we know it's a junior high school. And like I said before, this is sounding more like public than private, but I can't be for sure on that. Next up, the stakeholders that could face consequences in this are Richard, his boss, the officer, and then the parents of the students. All those people could be damaged in this situation. Richard has potentially his job on the line. His boss may lose credibility. The officer might get brought into this. And then the parents of the students could definitely be affected by all of this. And then next, David and Richard have probably the biggest stake in the matter. The school policy is also at stake. Some things I would like to know. I would like to know more about the school suspension and alternative policy, just to know what it says specifically, so that we can make an official decision. I would also be intrigued to know more about the perspective of Richard's boss, why he was not open to not reprimanding him. But I do think you have enough to make an initial decision to act. The first option would be to not give David an alternative placement, let him come back that next week. which could result in a possible termination of Richard. And Richard still gets the write-up. On the flip side, Richard could redo a suspension, an alternative setting for David. Richard would not have a write-up, but he would lose a lot of respect from parents. And then in the middle of the two, you could try to take your write-up to if there's some sort of a review board, just depending on the district's policy. Could go through some sort of an appeal process for his own write-up, or maybe there's another process for David's punishment that we don't know about. So just evaluating those options. If you stand pat, the pros are that ethically it feels like the most right decision to stand up for David. And this is another place where I thought modeling ethical behavior in personal conduct and relationships came into play. And then one of the major cons is you could result in being fired, and then a broken relationship, or even a broken relationship between your boss. The next one I had was punishing David. You stuck to your policy and you're by the rules. Those are the pros. You did what your boss wanted. The cons would be your parents could get upset, which could spread. I mean, if one parent knows, there's more than one parent that knows. And then like I mentioned earlier, it's what message are you sending your students? It's even if you get bullied, you're going to be punished. And then lastly, if you're going to appeal a decision, it could work out best for all the parties. Maybe we come to a decision that makes both parties happy. But the con is, there could be zero change in result. It could also eat up a lot of valuable time. So, having said everything that I have, the best option that I see is to not punish David, but appeal your reprimand, or clarify better to your boss. So start there. Start with your boss. Go and see if you can get an answer on why he feels you did the wrong thing. If he doesn't, that's when you go and try to appeal that reprimand. This will hopefully keep your relationship with parents, sending the message, just because the student's getting bullied, they aren't going to get punished. But it also keeps your relationship with your boss hopefully strong, since you're communicating with your boss. And then lastly, this is where I felt like all of it came together and the standard was placed in, which was demonstrate the capacity to evaluate the ethical dimension of issues, analyze decisions in terms of established ethical frameworks to communicate about and advocate for ethical and legal decisions. I think with what we're doing here, we're still inside of the legal matters of it all, but also you're operating from an ethical decision of standing up for that student. Thank you for listening.